Well, hey, if you're still hanging out with me, what with my profanity and all the rest of it, my direct communication style. Thank you for hanging out with me. I really appreciate you sticking with me if you are. And I know I have my comments closed for reasons that I explained in the last episode, but well, I just hope that this is useful to you in some way, you know, that if there's anybody out there who finds this ever, you know, I just hope that you get something from it and that it's useful for you in your life. Yeah, so this is episode 37, which I might have already said. And I've been reading this book. I think last episode I said over a year. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it's not over a year. Let's see, I'm looking at the date here. Man, I don't know. Maybe it's closer to a year. But believe it or not, I'm still on chapter 3 of this book. I'm still on the first right, quote unquote, as outlined. Not that it's the most important, you know, and I don't even know if it's as outlined. You know, again, I'm not a scholar. But we're looking at Right View, chapter 3 of On the Path, an anthology on the Noble Eightfold Path, drawn from the Pāli Canon. And this is written by Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu, who is an American Buddhist monk. And he's widely respected for his translations of Buddhist texts and his teachings on meditation and the Dhamma. His works are deeply rooted in the Theravāda Buddhist tradition, emphasizing a direct, practical approach to the Buddhist teachings. And really grateful, again, that this is in the Creative Commons, and so I can do this, so long as I don't profit from it, which I don't and won't. All right, so we left off with nobody's favorite topic, renunciation. Yeah, you know, we spent a goodly amount of time talking about renunciation. I went off the rails a little bit last week, let those F-bombs fly. I'm sure that drove off some people. It's all right. It's all right. I get it. Probably one of my longer episodes, I would say. You know, I definitely have had a lot to say about renunciation because of my own, you know, struggles with addiction, you know. And again, you can hear my whole story about my relationship to food, kind of. And you know, I continue to work with my proclivity towards addiction. You know, so yeah, I had a lot to say about renunciation. You know, and how I grapple, you know, with my own. Just all of it, you know. And so long episode there. But today is a new day. Today is a new section. So we've been exploring mundane right view in Buddhism. Yeah, and I realize, you know, that particularly if you're in the West, you know, I'm Western, obviously, and, you know, I say that in every episode. So, you know, when I hear the word mundane, if I didn't have a background in Buddhism at all, you know, if someone were to say, oh, that's mundane right view, what I would hear is, oh, that's irrelevant. That's not important. That's trivial. Oh, that doesn't matter. No. Mundane. It's irrelevant. It's pedestrian. It's gauche. It's whatever. That's so hopefully if you've been following along, you know, either on your own studies, you know, going back, and I was just watching the coolest video. Sorry, I do this. Welcome to my brain. It's 14 years old, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but Stephen Batchelor was hosting it, or maybe it was a conversation with Stephen Batchelor, who is a well-known British secular Buddhist, and this gentleman who I can't think of. And I love what this gentleman had to say. He was really kind of doing what I admittedly do, which is scolding, but he does it in a much more genuinely Buddhist way, honestly. I mean, he's to my view, what I'm doing is following the Dhamma. Right speech at the right time. Right speech doesn't always mean kind. Anyway, I don't want to go off the rails. We'll get into all that stuff. but he was talking about how that Buddhism actually really isn't a thing. And he goes back and says it's really just about the Dhamma, and how the Dhamma, the idea, Buddha taught about Dhamma and the experiential process of being with and in the Dhamma process, the Dhammic process. And so anyway, that was really interesting to me. And so that really got to me, kind of a different way of thinking about that, and I especially like it because I know how much I struggle with my own clinging, as I talk about openly here about, I go to spaces, well, I'm just going to say it, particularly in tech, and I'm just, and especially like Western psychology and how it talks about mindfulness, and it's just, I have to admit, I can feel my own clinging to purity, which I talked about in the last episode, and how that's my Shempa point. That's my trigger point. Not that that's the only one. But I don't want to go off the rails. I'll just say that that's where we are right now. And if you're following along, if you actually downloaded the book, this is a free book. So you'll see in the comments, where you can find it online, and, you can download it as well. And if you did that and you're looking at a PDF version of the book, then I'm on the bottom, or maybe halfway down on page 193. And this is Transcendent Right View. So this is Sutta 102. And what, monks, is right view? Knowledge with regard to stress. Knowledge with regard to the origination of stress. Knowledge with regard to the cessation of stress. Knowledge with regard to the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. This, monks, is called right view. And that comes from SN 45:8. One thing I have come to find for myself is that when it comes to getting into historical texts like this that I am largely ignorant of, I try to not take anything for granted. So I'm actually going to go off. And even though I feel like I quote unquote remember from, when I had a lot more, I was much more active in Sangha and the text in my 20s and 30s than I am today. Not that it's just time and blah, blah, blah. Things that are, not relevant to what we're doing right now. I'm going to go consult to make sure that I really capture the nuance of this very seemingly simple sutta. So I'll be right back. So yeah, I'm back, and yeah, it's straightforward, but it's not, right? It is what I remembered, but I'm so glad I checked because, it kind of gave me some words to put an even finer point on it that weren't available to me readily. So really clearly, right view. Life has suffering. To my view, one word has led people all over the world astray. Or maybe not all over the world. I won't speak to I'll speak to the West. That's what I know, the West. I'm very familiar with Western Buddhism. And also just kind of, the Western general kind of, understanding of what they think they know Buddhism is. The Buddha didn't say life is suffering. The Buddha said life has suffering. So if you think about the difference, it's actually pretty remarkable. And I'm just saying, if you really think about what the actual meaning is, I think you would find it pretty hard to disagree with that. If you've ever been in physical pain in your life, I have chronic pain I've been working with for 10 years. My father spent half his life in a wheelchair, right? So maybe you've experienced physical pain. Maybe someone that you know has experienced physical pain. Maybe you watch the news right now and you see people in incredible physical pain, emotional stress, memories, fears, conditioned beliefs about this, the quote unquote self. So maybe you have this little narrative running in your mind. I'm nothing. I'm worthless. Or maybe you have this running in your mind. I'm better. I'm right. They're stupid. I'm right. All of that, if you really look at it, get out of it a bit to observe it, then you might recognize that it's producing stress. Here's a good metaphor or analogy. I always forget. It's been a minute. So yeah, I talk in here about how I by the way, I just got to share this with anybody who's listening. Yesterday, I sent in the rough draft of my dissertation for my PhD in media psychology. I just have to say that out loud because this has been 5 years of brutal, grueling hard work. And to thank my husband, who has supported me and made it possible. Yeah. So back to it. Here's the analogy or whatever. If you're someone who uses your smartphone a lot, right? Depending on the age of the audience, this will vary, right? But if you're of a certain age, then you're probably on it pretty often. Or if not your phone, maybe you're on your computer. You're on the internet somewhere. You're on the internets. So I don't want to get into a big like soapbox about what I'm learning as a media psychology PhD student about what all that scrolling is actually doing to your brain and all of that. And you can go and find that out for yourself. I know I've been beating that drum for 15 years, and I'm really happy to report that, I think we're kind of finally starting to get it in the West. Other countries have kind of got it a while ago. If you could somehow, and this is going to require, number one, it's going to require your willingness to do it, right? Because nobody can do any of this for you. Nobody can do any of this for you. They can support you, they can be there. I mentioned I meditate my Discord server every day. And that's just kind of a digital Sangha for me and whoever else wants to have it. We don't talk, we just sit together, in an actual Sangha, again, I don't want to even get into Sanghas because now we're kind of, to a certain degree, we're kind of getting away from Dhamma, which this gentleman said, stop calling it Buddhism, just call it Dhamma. So we're kind of getting away a little bit from that. Remember that what the Buddha taught was this: the Eightfold Path with the supplementary factors of another voice and admirable friendship. That's what the Buddha taught. Not teachers, not monks in robes and things. That came later. Put on it. Put on top of it. Which isn't, as you know, is it a problem? I think it is a problem, but I'm learning to soften a little bit. I know I can be very rigid. I can be really rigid. I'm really rigid just because of what have I experienced for myself and how I worry that because I actually have seen from my own mind how fabricated our thought stream is, I worry that we're wiping out a psychological framework that really, really works and could help a lot of people by appropriating it and kind of superimposing our own epistemology on it. But, I'm learning, hey, people get it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. And that is not my responsibility. That's just my clinging. That Zen Buddhism is not, what I'm practicing. It's another thing. And that's a thing that gets to be. And I appreciate, there are a couple, I've named them in the past, but there's a couple of Zen, like one's maybe they both are, I don't know. I don't know. I don't really, anyway, I think one of them was a monk. a Zen monk. And now he's got, I think he wrote a book too, and he's got a really great YouTube channel. He's a funny guy, really funny sense of humor. You know, he's very much a Western Zen Buddhist, you know, and brings all the things in. What I appreciate about him is that he is very respectful of the Dhamma. You know, he, to my view, you know, he, for the most part, I would say he doesn't try to pass off something else as the Dhamma. You know, to my view, when someone does that, there's one of two things going on. One, they actually don't know the Dhamma. Perhaps they were never taught it. Maybe they were only given it vis-a-vis what kind of, it's how it was conditioned later, right? So they actually never got exposure to the actual, you know, kind of, or, you know, they're just trying to kind of find a way to avoid cognitive dissonance for themselves, you know. That's the part where, you know, in Buddhism, again, in the Dhamma, anyway, I'm just going to keep calling it Buddhism. That's where, you know, we can convince ourselves of anything, right? And that's where we need to understand that we don't have the free will, and we don't have the choice making that we think we have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, except that we do have some agency, et cetera, et cetera. So there you go. So life has suffering. Suffering has a cause, says this sutta. And in Buddhism, the cause is really two things. And I don't know if they're taught as two things. I'm not going to say two things, okay? I think of them as two things. I think of them as two things for myself because that's how I experience them. There are two things in my mind that actually arise for me, not at the same time. I'm not saying that's how it is. I'm just saying the suffering has a cause, and the cause is craving and clinging. Craving and clinging. Craving. So I'll start with craving. So again, I know I keep using that word subtle, but it's not me. It's the Dhamma. How subtle this can get. In all seriousness, yeah. In old-timey Buddhism, how subtle this is. In Buddhism, how subtle this is. You can crave something, right? Maybe you're bored. Now, I would say I'm a Gen Xer. Okay, so there was a lot more of a stopgap between boredom and feeding boredom when I was growing up. In other words, there weren't any phones. You know, if I used to work in the summer with my stepdad. He was a furniture salesman. I kind of had two childhoods. It was really a trip. I'm really grateful for it. And so I would go on the road with him in the summers, you know, and he'd pay me to help him out, and you know, we'd travel around furniture stores. And I was bored as shit, you know. And all of his clients were, you know, very nice to me because I was a kid and they could see that I was bored. And I even have memories of just sitting on, you know, one of the sofas at one of the furniture shops and my legs swinging, kicking, trying to find something to occupy my mind with, you know. But now we have these phones in our pockets, right? We have this internet. We have this kind of, I was listening to a podcast this morning, and this gentleman is studying online sports, esports, and talking, and his whole book is about how, what exactly psychologically these algorithms have been kind of leveraging to make this such an effective multi-million, billion-dollar industry. So, you know, I think today, you know, the stopgap between boredom and assuaging boredom is maybe hardly anything at all. So it might be actually a lot harder for you to see this for yourself, this sutta. It might require a lot more effort. And it might require, I don't even know what it might require, you know. The more research I read, the more I see correlates to how the brain is changing because of all of this, you know. And young people who were exposed to screens during their developmental period, their brains are different. They're just different. I don't have the same brain as you. If you grew up with that screen in front of your face, I know there are people in my, I guess, I don't want to say it's my industry because it's really not. It's kind of an adjacent industry. It's part of what my research is about, but it's not really what I'm interested in at large, and that's virtual reality. I mean, I think virtual reality is incredible. I think that I think it is the ultimate. It is doing remarkably healing work for so many populations. And I think it's fantastic. I also see so many hazards. Just if I was to do a qualitative study, like a longitudinal qualitative study, that maybe that was like thematic or narrative or something, then I'm confused about VR. Because on the one hand, I can see the efficacy, and on the other hand, I see how all of this tech has kind of done a lot of harm. And I realize, look, I'm just saying that it's not 100%, but there's just too many correlations for me to be like, yeah, it's all good. Buddhism, again, whatever, the Dhamma, Buddhism, whatever, is the middle path, right? So nothing is all good. Life has suffering, right? I mean, nothing is all good. Life has suffering. And then, so number 3, right? So suffering has a cause. Suffering has an end, right? So the cessation. Well, you stop clinging. You stop craving. You stop clinging. You stop craving. The suffering stops. This is another one that gets really, 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 really confused, I think, in the West, where somehow people have equated this notion with, oh, so you just don't ever want anything. You just don't ever desire anything, ever, ever, ever. So I won't repeat it here. I would just say, if you have the book, make sure you go back and you read up, or go back and listen to earlier episodes if you're listening instead, about the kind of desire that we have in Buddhism and what it means and how it drives our urgency. That we spent a great bit of time earlier in the book. That word urgency, fire in your belly, urgency. What are you doing with your fucking life? Urgency, right? I would say that's a pretty strong desire, wouldn't you? So it's not that you don't have a desire for anything, right? In Buddhism, the Eightfold Path, and again, you don't have to follow it, right? It's a map, man. If you don't want to follow it, don't follow it. Just do some other thing. But it's true that I don't pursue quote unquote success. And I've talked about that. Not that I judge others who do, unless I perceive in them this clinging. And how do I know they're clinging? Because they're power playing me. They're trying to they're trying to use narrative and language in social settings to assert their dominance. These are all signs of low self-esteem. But I pick up on all that, and most people do. It's why you feel so upset when you hang up a phone or you leave a party. You didn't imagine that. So, and it could also be historical, where maybe a behavior is in fact a move that savors of so it's still the move, right? So then it becomes about how you engage with it. So this idea of clinging and this idea of stopping the cling. So I think you can usually tell when, like, for instance, artists are not clinging to their art because of how they talk about it. Yeah, it's not my art. It's this kind of and I would say there's not a sense of deference either, which can kind of come across as I'm so spiritually evolved. This is my art. That's kind of bullshit too, right? So I find that people who have really kind of maybe cultivated, this, I'll just call it, this is my view anyway, right relationship with their art and the art that they make, is that they don't feel better then. They don't feel special then. They don't think that they're precious or special because they're an artist. They don't think that they're better than someone who put the battery in their car, changed their oil. They don't think that they're better than, the person who brought them water and chips and salsa to the table. If they still think they're better than even a little bit, then they're still really clinging to, how important they think they are. So yeah, they're going to continue feeling suffering because that's ego. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to keep playing that game and living in that reality, then yeah, your ego is going to continually be going off, because you've got this whole identity that you've built up around you in relationship to your art and how important you think you are because you can do this and you can do that. And isn't that great? And isn't that grand? I mentioned that I was a singer. And yes, I could sing from a very young age. I was very lucky to have that, my grandmother gave me, somebody gave me recordings, like old, cassette tapes of when I was 5 or 6 singing. And, I wasn't like American Idol good, because man, there's some 5 and 6-year-olds, but I was good. I had a natural ability that I feel very blessed with. The rest of it was incredibly hard work, which also meant that I had access. I went to a school that had choir. Choir was my solace. It was my place to go to feel safe and feel like a part of a community, even though I was going through a terrible time and was really very kind of socially isolating myself in high school. I was really, really, really struggling. But nobody on the outside knew that. I made sure of that. And choir was just a place that I could go to pretend that my life was normal. One of the benefits of that, and my life was normal, and it also wasn't, so the benefit of that, having that, meant that I got to really, really refine and train and hone a very lucky kind of thing that I had, that, my maternal grandmother was a very good singer, apparently, so hey, maybe I got her genes. I don't know. But it's the only thing that I had to do with it is that I took what I had and I developed it. I mean, that's really all that I did, and I love to sing, I mean, so there was choir, and then there was me hiding out in my mom and stepdad's garage every night for 2 to 3 hours after school, and singing and dancing for hours before I'd go to bed. So it was a lifetime of practice, and having a really good teacher named Mr. Reed when I was in high school, who was like a drill sergeant and who I hated when I was in high school, but came to be grateful for and appreciate in many ways later, when I think about how I overcame my shyness with my voice and I really let my true voice come out, and how it made me a much better singer, a stronger singer. So anyway, I'm going off the rails here, but and then there's a way to end it, right? The sutta saying there's a way to end all of this, and that's by living according to the Noble Eightfold Path, and that's what we're looking at in this book, beginning with right view. So that was a really long explanation for that sutta. Because of that, I think I'm just going to read several, and then I'll just kind of generally, kind of comment on them. Here's Sutta 103. And what is the faculty of discernment? There is the case where a monk, a disciple of the noble ones, is discerning, endowed with discernment of arising and passing away, noble, penetrating, leading to the right ending of stress. He discerns, as it has come to be, this is stress. This is the origination of stress. This is the cessation of stress. This is the path, practice, leading to the cessation of stress. This is called the faculty of discernment. And that's SN 48:10. Sutta 104. Anytime one examines, investigates, and scrutinizes internal dhammas with discernment, that is analysis of dhammas as a factor for awakening. And any time one examines, investigates, and scrutinizes external dhammas with discernment, that too is analysis of dhammas as a factor for awakening. And that's SN 46:52. And so I'll read one more, and then I'll just kind of comment on this series of 3, all of which are under the transcendent right view heading. So this one's longer. Sutta 106. Now this, monks, Is the noble truth of stress. Birth is stressful, aging is stressful, death is stressful, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair are stressful. Association with the unbeloved is stressful. Separation from the loved is stressful. Not getting what is wanted is stressful. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are stressful. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the origination of stress. The craving that makes for further becoming, accompanied by passion and delight, relishing now, here, and now, there, i.e., craving for sensuality, craving for becoming, craving for non-becoming. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the cessation of stress, the remainderless dispassioning and cessation, renunciation, relinquishment, release, and letting go of that very craving. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Precisely this Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. This is the noble truth of stress. This noble truth of stress is to be comprehended. This noble truth of stress has been comprehended. Vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. This noble truth of the origination of stress is to be abandoned. This noble truth of the origination of stress has been abandoned. Vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. This is the noble truth of the cessation of stress. This noble truth of the cessation of stress is to be directly experienced. This noble truth of the cessation of stress has been directly experienced. Vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. This is the noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. This noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress is to be developed. This noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress has been developed. And monks, as long as this, my 3-round, 12 permutation knowledge and vision concerning these 4 noble truths as they have come to be, was not pure, I did not claim to have directly awakened to the right self-awakening, unexcelled in the cosmos with its devas, maras, and brahmas, with its contemplatives and brahmins, its royalty and common folk. But as soon as this, my 3-round 12 permutation come to be, 12 permutation knowledge and vision concerning these 4 noble truths as they have come to be, was truly pure, then I did claim to have directly awakened to the right self-awakening, unexcelled in the cosmos, with its devas, maras, and brahmas, with its contemplatives and Brahmins, its royalty and common folk, knowledge and vision arose in me. Unprovoked is my release. This is the last birth. There is now no further becoming. And that's SN 56:11. Wow, this is just incredibly rich. So obviously, I need to do some major robot research here using my robot trained on, Buddhism. What I have here are the suttas. That's what I have. And I have robot. I'm not a scholar, as you know. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go kind of run this through, make sure, and then I'll come back and do a little bit of commentary on this. Okay. So Sutta 105. So after checking in here, and I really love the way that Robot talks about it. Robot actually describes Sutta 105 as the fuel of awakening. And yeah, I cannot think of a better word to describe it, at least in my subjective experience. I can only speak for myself here. When you start to practice, you start to become more aware of more subtle states of mind. Or you start to become aware of thoughts that are producing in the body/mind a negative experience of reality. So you come to start to notice that, and again, this is earlier sections, fabrication. We're getting into the 5 aggregates, as you just heard. Everything is input. You essentially, after a fashion, to a certain degree, are a sponge, both consciously but also unconsciously. So it's all within the sense gates, okay? If we can hear it, if we can see it, if we can smell it, if we can touch it, we're going to create a story around that. We're going to start to create an I, me, mine, a self around that. And then, from there, we can start to tell some really scary stories. As you train, you can start to notice, with clients, I say, nip it in the bud. And I think the more that you do body work, whatever that means for you, and again, I all these words, it's just like, ugh. Look, I'm just going to speak to my practice, okay? Yes, I meditate every day, and yes, that's part of my practice, and I meditate on my mat, but I also meditate anyway. I try to bring myself with me wherever I go. How about that? Okay. I try not to check out. It's why I don't use a smartphone. It's why I'm not on social media outside of LinkedIn. I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying, as you know, I have mentioned that I struggle with addiction. So I have discernment. Why would I do that to myself when I know what I know for myself? Because I have seen for myself that Buddhism is right, that the sense gates are trapping me constantly, and I can learn to discern between the ones that are helpful and the ones that are harmful. And again, this is the kind of I never know how to say that word, satirical, the religious, the cosmological, or maybe not even that, the kind of the ethics, the framework, the ethics, there is definitely this language like, there is wholesome and unwholesome thinking, right? I can ruminate. Let me give you, for instance. So last episode, I talked about someone who was just being themselves. They were just communicating the way they communicated. I perceived a power move, and it was a power move. It was just a very subtle one. And so, I just very neutrally just said, yeah, this is my house. So this is what I do. And I mentioned that this person, wanted to continue. Was I right? No, yes. Was she right? No, yes. In other words, this is a non-dual tradition. I asserted a boundary, and I withdrew my attention when I began to notice that continuing engagement would slip me into behavior that was not skillful. I nipped it in the bud. Not to make anyone wrong, to protect my sense gates. So this is some pretty wild stuff, I realize. Anywho, I'll get on over to Sutta 106. And yeah, this is really where, this is the real crux of right view. And this sutta is really kind of laying out the crux of right view, which we talked about in earlier videos, the Four Noble Truths, which this is it, right? Life has suffering. We can cling to it and cling and cling and want it. So then we cling to it because we want it. Do you see why I kind of split those two apart? Because to my mind, the way that it arises for me is I want it. And the wanting of it, the momentum of the wanting of it produces the clinging. At least that's my experience of it. And then there's a cessation. There's a way to drop the struggle, right? And then the bold claim is, and that would be to follow the Eightfold Path. And again, here's where I think in the West, well, it's just such a Judeo-Christian place, that it's just virtually impossible, I think, for people to separate this from their Judeo-Christian framework, which is very dualistic. So people hear things like the Eightfold Path and they're like, oh, is this like the Bible? Is this like not that I'm complaining about the Bible, it's not at all. I'm not at all. I'm just saying this was a map. It's a map, a map without a God, which is why I think a lot of secular people have really, really taken to it, because it provides a sense of meaning to them, which we all need to have, right? But they also are really into the idea that it doesn't have a God concept. There's probably a whole lot about it they don't know that they're really missing out on, and I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope that changes. I hope that changes, But so yeah, I don't know that there is a whole lot to say about this. I feel like I'll just say a little bit, but I feel like the sutta itself did a really good job of kind of laying it out. The truth is stress, dukkha. Yeah, so again, I think we kind of already talked about it. Hey, I'm going to die. You're going to die. We're all going to die. Our spouses are going to die. Our moms are going to die. Our dads are going to die. Our kids are going to die. Our pets are going to die. The planet's going to die. The sun's going to die. The stars are going to die. We're going to get old. We might get sick. We might lose our mind. We're going to feel sadness. We're going to feel incredible grief that feels like we're fucking falling apart, suffocating from it. We're going to be angry and frustrated because we're not getting what we want, one that I suffer with, right? I can feel it in my heart when I'm struggling, frustrated. Why, right? That's me, my I. I'm not getting what I want, I'm frustrated, stuck in what I dislike. This is another one that I have to be mindful about, really mindful about. As I mentioned in the last episode, my propensity, whatever that means, is to look for danger, which makes it very easy to quickly see the things that I don't like, right? And if you have a traumatic background, right, whether it be maybe you've served in combat, maybe you've experienced, some kind of extreme trauma. And I've had students like this, students who would never, ever, ever, they would always come early so that they could make sure to get the same seat. And they would always sit in the back right corner. And I'll tell you, and I guarantee you, I know why they did it. And I guarantee you, I can't guarantee you anything, but I would be willing to bet anything that they were in the military, they were a veteran, and that they had seen combat. And the reason why I say that is because they would move all the way to the back of the room. They would sit in the very last seat in the very last row. Why? No one could come up behind them because the only thing that was behind them, they were in a corner, so there was nobody on their six, just meaning nobody that was directly behind them that could sneak up, and nobody that could sneak up in their peripheral, which it's hard to be consciously aware of, right, when we're thinking, when we're cognating. So he set himself up to take out those sense gates so that he didn't have to worry about them, and he could let that part of his brain go offline to just attend to what was in front of him. That was the only way he could feel safe. That's what trauma looks like, right? And I suffered from extreme PTSD, weird coping mechanisms, and just things that I'd learned to protect my sense of autonomy that were no longer serving me, which is eventually actually what led me to get into, a second 12-step program. Al-Anon, which I was, in for, 12 years maybe. And again, I won't talk about it. It's just kind of part of the principles of the 12 steps. You don't really talk about it. I'll just say it also was a very important part of my recovery. I don't like the word recovery. It's a huge part of my path. It's a huge part of helping me to understand myself, my heart, my experience. And it's also been a huge part of me helping to forgive, to really open my heart when I didn't think that was possible. I just did not think that was a possible thing. So, as I've mentioned before, today, it's just Buddhism, but it's not because I've done a lot of other things and I support all those things. I think you have to find your own way. Again, this is a map. It's a path. Yeah, so we kind of already talked about, that it comes from craving. Whether that's really gross craving, like I want to snort a line right now, or it's really subtle craving, like I want that person to fail so that I feel better about myself, right? So that's all craving. And clinging to that craving is going to have the same negative impact on you. One is very, again, gross, just meaning overt, and the other one is very subtle, meaning that I call that TV drama mind. I mean, think about it. Watch any TV drama, the politics, the backbiting, the coercion, the social leveraging, power dynamics. Life actually doesn't have to be like that. Not all humans are actually like that. You actually don't have to live in that world if you don't want to. And if you are choosing to live in that world, it's going to be a tough go. I think you're just going to have to find a way to, I don't know what you're going to have to do. Right livelihoods are a really big part of the Eightfold Path. And I think it's because and I don't believe this just because the Buddha said so. I've seen it for myself. I said in the last episode, I was making 6 figures and I had health insurance and I walked out of that job and now I'm unemployed and have nothing. Not complaining, but I take right livelihood really seriously. And I saw some things happening that I did not want to participate in. And I was also, because of that, I was becoming a shitty person to be around. I did not nip it in the bud. It was time to get the fuck out. And so I got the fuck out. So I think, it's really, really hard, I think, for someone to be happy. If they don't find some kind of map that is going to get you to recognize the truth of this, that this is how your mind works, that all Homo sapien minds work. So that's my claim. It's also Buddhist claim. Okay, so I'm going to keep on reading. So Sutta 107. And what is comprehension? Any ending of passion, ending of aversion, ending of delusion. This is called comprehension. And that's SN 22:23. And I love that. I love that because what that suggests is that, oftentimes when we think of the word comprehension, we think of a very cognitive process. Oh, I get it. I get it intellectually. I get it. My brain has cognated and it has, put together the dots or whatever. But this sounds a lot more kind of subjectively experienced, that, because it has ended. And this is true, you can see this for yourself, that when you, through effort, through practice, you cultivate practices that end the passion in the body. Again, this is very subtle. It's you'll see for yourself, you'll comprehend for yourself. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, and this is where I am absolutely not awake. It's like I could have looked at this person's post as something positive. Here's where it gets really dicey. That's true. But now I'm coming up against speech. And not everybody's going to agree with me on this that practice Buddhism, especially Western Buddhists. But even Theravāda Buddhists, that who are kind of, I'm just going to say it, kind of people that I look to because they're actually practicing like the original Buddhism. They're probably not going to agree with me on this, and that's okay. I definitely am looking forward to having, another voice in this practice. But, to my view, well, not just to my view, but, right speech is not about being kind. That's kind of a Western translation. So again, I encourage you to go and we'll get to right speech. But, I chose to, and I talked about this in the last episode, I chose to let her know that I saw the maneuver where a Theravāda Buddhist or teacher might come back to me and say, but was that wise, Sarah? Was that kind? Perhaps they're not capable of seeing it. That's a great argument. And this is something that I have to decide for myself because it does create passion in me, which the Buddha said, this is what's causing your suffering, dude. Why are you stirring up your own suffering? So see how easy it is to kind of see for yourself. If you really kind of, I've been practicing all this stuff for a long time. So, it just kind of becomes, again, it's a map. It's a map that I kind of apply to different aspects of my life. All right. So, Sutta 108, monks, I will teach you the 5 aggregates and the 5 clinging aggregates. Listen and pay close attention. I will speak. As you say, Lord, the monks responded to him. The Blessed One said, now what, monks, are the 5 aggregates? Whatever form is past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, that is called the form aggregate. Whatever feeling is past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, that is called the feeling aggregate. Whatever fabrications are past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, this is called the consciousness aggregate. These are called the 5 aggregates. And what are the 5 clinging aggregates? Whatever form, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, is clingable, offers sustenance, and is accompanied with effluence, that is called the form clinging aggregate. I know this is really heavy duty stuff here, and we are going to get into this. It's probably going to be the end of the episode because, man, this is just so rich. So we'll get into all these. Okay. Whatever feeling, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, is clingable, offers sustenance, and is accompanied with effluence, that is called the feeling clinging aggregate. The feeling clinging aggregate. Whatever perception, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or sublime, common or sublime, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, is clingable, offers sustenance, and is accompanied with effluence, this is called the perception clinging aggregate. The perception clinging aggregate. I'm. By the way, the repeat is me. Sorry, I should say that. I'll stop doing that so that you're not confused. Yeah, he's only saying this once. Whatever fabrications, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, are clingable, offer sustenance, and are accompanied with effluence, those are called the fabrication clinging aggregate. Whatever consciousness, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or sublime, common, blatant or subtle. I really like that word sublime, don't I? Common or sublime, far or near, is clingable, offers sustenance, and is accompanied with effluence. This is called the consciousness clinging aggregate. These are called the 5 clinging aggregates. And that's from SN 22:48. So obviously, this is a huge crux of practice and the training here, but I definitely don't want to say a word about it until I've run it by the genius called Robot to make sure that I remember correctly. So I'll be right back. Yeah, okay, great. So I went a little back and forth with Robot, asked it to lose the goofy Buddhist jargon and just kind of penetrate it, penetrate the text. That's what we do. We penetrate the text. It's a living, breathing text because we breathe life into it, right? The Bible's that way, the Quran, the Torah, right? So I was really happy with what Robot had to say once I pushed it and pressured it a little bit, to get in there, man. I'm going to just read to you what Buddha. Sorry, Buddha. Or maybe you like this. Maybe, hey, Buddha might be like, that's right. Yeah, call Robot Buddha. I love it. I'm not going to do that. But here after kind of, saying, hey, Robot, no, I want you to penetrate this now. Don't just give me, pedestrian terminology like it's a Hallmark card, penetrate the text. So let me read it to you. First, train yourself to notice the difference between what helps you grow and what drags you down. Keep paying attention to that. Because the more you do, the sharper your understanding gets. Then face 4 facts about human life. 1, being alive means you're going to deal with pain, loss, change, and disappointment. No exceptions. 2, a big part of that misery comes from the way we chase after things or push them away, thinking that will make us secure or satisfied. 3, if you stop feeding that chasing and pushing, the misery stops. There's a way of living built on clarity, integrity, steady focus, and wise choices that actually makes that freedom possible. Isn't that great? Isn't that fantastic? It's just so simple. I love that. So I don't really have anything else to say about that, quite frankly. I mean, I think that Robot did a lovely job. And I can also see that I've been talking a long time. And so I am going to leave it here. And we will pick up Transcendent Right View where we left off next time. And so that will be the top of page 197. All right, so take good care. And if you're listening, thanks so much for listening. And I appreciate you. Be well.